Picture this: Sunday brunch, cozy farmhouse-style dining table, mimosas, fluffy pancakes, the whole Instagram-worthy setup. My mother-in-law is in full hostess mode, smiling at guests, playing the perfect matriarch. I'm quietly putting some fruit on my plate, minding my own business, when she leans toward the lady sitting next to her and says in the loudest whisper you've ever heard, loud enough for the entire table to catch every single word, "Ever since my son married, we've had a financial burden to carry." Then she looks directly at me and adds with that fake sweet smile, "Some people just take and never bring anything to the table." The entire room goes silent. Forks stop midair. Some people look at me with pity, others awkwardly cough, trying to mask the tension, and me, I just sit there, gripping my water glass, feeling my throat tighten and my eyes burn. But inside my head, there's only one thought echoing: financial burden? Auntie, that $3.7 million house you so proudly show off to guests, giving them tours of every corner like you're some real estate queen, the title deed that just got printed yesterday has a new owner's name on it. And spoiler alert, it's mine, not yours. Want to know what happened next? Well, she served scrambled eggs with a side of public humiliation that morning. But just a few weeks later, when the real estate lawyers sat in their living room, spread out the purchase papers, and calmly announced that their $3.7 million house was now officially in my name, let me tell you, her eyes were glued to the floor more than her plate ever was. Stick around, because this story gets absolutely wild. Let me take you back a bit so you understand the full picture. From day one of my marriage, my mother-in-law had this pattern, this constant narrative she loved repeating. "My son provides, you just exist." That was her favorite line. At family gatherings, she'd casually drop comments like, "We don't really know what she does all day," or "She spends, he earns," even though the reality was the complete opposite. She painted this picture where her son was Atlas holding up the world, and I was just some decorative burden hanging off his shoulders. But here's the thing nobody bothered to check. I'm not some unemployed freeloader living off anyone's generosity. I work in a high-earning field. I've got my own successful business that I've been running for years. Even before marriage, I had solid savings, investments, a portfolio that would make most people's jaws drop. My husband? He's great. I love him. But financially speaking, he's got an average income. Nothing wrong with that, but his mother had this delusion that the universe revolved around her beta and his paycheck. Now let's talk about their house, this beautiful property in an upscale area valued at around $3.7 million. It was their dream home, their pride, their everything. But what guests didn't see was the hidden pressure. Retirement was approaching fast. The mortgage, property taxes, maintenance costs, they were all piling up. Their finances were getting tighter by the month. Behind closed doors, there were these quiet conversations, these worried whispers about we might have to sell one day. But publicly, never. They'd rather die than admit they were struggling. So here's the irony that kept me up at night. To them, I was the minus sign on their Excel sheet, the financial burden dragging them down. But they couldn't see, or maybe they refused to see, that the person they were treating like a parasite was the exact same person who would end up securing their entire future, saving their beloved roof over their heads. They saw me as the problem when I was actually going to become their solution. That Sunday brunch wasn't just another family gathering, it was the moment everything crystallized for me. They'd invited relatives, friends, the whole social circle. Conversation was flowing, mimosas were being refilled, and somehow the topic shifted to finances. You know how it goes. Someone mentions the cost of living, retirement planning, medical expenses, all those heavy adult topics. One of the aunts, trying to be sweet, said to my in-laws, "At least your kids will take care of you when you're older." That's when it happened. My mother-in-law let out this performative sigh, the kind where she wanted everyone to notice her struggle, and said loud and clear, "My son does everything. Ever since he married, we've had an extra financial burden to deal with." Then she turned, looked in my direction, and drove the knife deeper. Some people just don't understand money. They spend and expect others to catch them when they fall. The table went dead silent. My husband shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Someone tried changing the subject, talking about the weather or sports or anything else, but the damage was done. Those words hung in the air like toxic smoke. I felt my throat close up. My eyes started burning with tears I refused to let fall. But I just sat there, folding my napkins slowly, mechanically, keeping my hands busy so I wouldn't shake. Inside my head, though, inside I was screaming, "You want to publicly brand me as a parasite? You want to serve me up as the family freeloader in front of everyone? Fine, but what you don't know, what you can't even begin to imagine, is that in just a few weeks, I'm going to buy your entire house. Not with your son's money, not with some loan or favor, with my own accounts, my own earnings, my own power. And when that title deed gets signed, when those papers become official, you're going to realize just how wrong you were about who the burden really is." The idea didn't come out of nowhere. A few months before that brunch, I'd started doing some research on the real estate market. It's something I do regularly as part of my investment strategy. I analyze neighborhoods, property values, market trends, and during one of those deep dives, I noticed their area: stable market, property values appreciating steadily, good long-term investment potential. Around the same time, I started picking up on their stress, little comments here and there. My father-in-law mentioning property tax increases, my mother-in-law complaining about repair costs, overheard phone calls about retirement funds not stretching as far as they hoped. They were trying to keep it quiet, maintain appearances, but the cracks were showing. That's when the thought hit me. They're eventually going to have to sell this house, either to some random investor who will flip it, or to a buyer who will gut the place and rebuild. They'll lose their family home, their comfort zone, everything. But what if there was another option? What if I bought it? Not as some revenge plot initially, just as a strategic move. I secure a solid investment property, they get the cash they need for retirement, and the house stays in the family. Win-win, right? I started planning. First decision was structure. Should I buy it through an LLC, keep my identity hidden until the last moment for maximum impact, or put it directly in my name, clean and clear? I went with a trust setup initially, which allowed me to make the offer without them immediately knowing it was me. The offer itself was calculated, market realistic, full price territory. I wanted them to get the best possible deal, no lowballing, no games. This wasn't about cheating them financially. This was about showing them exactly who they'd been underestimating. I sat down with my husband and laid it all out. Depending on your marriage dynamic, this conversation could go different ways. In my case, I was transparent. I told him, "I'm buying your parents' house. This is happening with or without your blessing, but I'd rather have your support." He was shocked, obviously, but after I explained the numbers, the logic, the fact that his parents would actually benefit from this, he came around. The in-laws, meanwhile, had no clue. All they knew was that their real estate agent had found an interested investor, some buyer who was serious, had financing ready, wanted to close quickly. They were relieved, honestly. The pressure was lifting. They'd be able to retire comfortably, travel, enjoy their lives without the constant worry of that massive mortgage hanging over them. But here's what kept me going through all the paperwork, all the inspections, all the legal processes. They thought I was a burden. They thought I brought nothing to the table. Meanwhile, the cash, the approvals, the signatures moving through the background, that was all me. Every single dollar that was about to secure their retirement, save their house from being sold to strangers, keep their legacy intact, that was coming from the woman they called a financial drain. The irony was thick you could cut it with a knife.
I coordinated with the real estate agent and the lawyer, told them exactly what I wanted, scheduled the final closing meeting at the house itself, frame it as a buyer introduction and document signing session, make it feel formal but comfortable, like they're meeting the new owner over tea and paperwork. My mother-in-law loved that idea. She probably imagined some wealthy older couple, maybe successful business owners, people she could show off to one last time before handing over the keys. The strategy was surgical. The agent would arrive first, set up the documents on their dining table, then the lawyer would come, brief everyone on the process, and finally the doorbell would ring. "That must be the buyer," someone would say. My mother-in-law would rush to the door, full hostess mode activated, ready to greet these mysterious investors who were taking her beloved home. Except when she opened that door, it wouldn't be strangers, it would be me, standing there calm, professional, holding my file folder, looking her directly in the eyes. And in that exact moment, everything she thought she knew about me, every assumption she'd made, every insult she'd thrown would shatter like glass. I rehearsed my approach mentally 100 times. No gloating, no sarcasm, just calm, respectful professionalism. Let the facts speak for themselves. Let the signed documents, the purchase price, the transfer of title do all the talking. The twist would drop at the precise moment when the agent said, "Let me introduce you to the buyer." That's when her world would flip upside down. I kept thinking about that dining table where she'd served her public humiliation with the scrambled eggs, that same living room where she'd painted me as the family burden. In just a few weeks, I'd be walking into that exact space, not as the broke daughter-in-law she imagined, but as the new owner of her $3.7 million property. The woman she'd underestimated was about to become her landlord. And that thought, I won't lie, it kept me smiling through every document I had to sign. Closing day finally arrived. Their living room was set up perfectly, in-laws sitting on the couch, my husband next to me looking slightly nervous, the real estate agent arranging papers on the coffee table, and the lawyer reviewing documents with that serious professional expression. My mother-in-law was slightly overdressed. You could tell she'd put effort into her appearance. She was anxious but excited, probably imagining what these mysterious buyers would be like. She'd even prepared refreshments. Cups were ready, cookies arranged on a plate. She was in full performance mode, ready to be the gracious seller, the dignified matriarch passing on her family home to worthy successors. She kept glancing at the door, checking her watch, adjusting her hair. Then it happened. The doorbell rang. The agent looked up casually and said, "That should be the buyer now." My mother-in-law practically jumped up, smoothing her dress, putting on her best smile. She walked to the door with this energy, this anticipation. You could see her mentally preparing her greeting, her little speech about the house's history. She opened the door and froze. Completely froze, because standing there, file in hand, dressed professionally, calm as anything, was me. Her face went through about 17 different emotions in 2 seconds. Confusion, shock, disbelief, anger, all mixing together into this expression I'll never forget. "What are you doing here?" she managed to say, her voice cracking slightly. The agent, completely oblivious to the family drama, responded cheerfully, "Perfect, everyone's here now. So as you know, this is the buyer of the property. Today we'll finalize the $3.7 million purchase and go over any remaining questions." The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. My father-in-law looked like someone had just told him gravity stopped working. My husband had this small, supportive smile. He knew what was coming. But my mother-in-law, she just stood there, mouth slightly open, unable to process what was happening. I walked in calmly and said in the most measured, professional tone I could manage, "आपने हमेशा कहा था कि ये घर आपकी greatest asset है. मैं agree करती हूँ. That's exactly why I thought this asset should stay within the family." I paused, let that sink in, then added with just the slightest edge, "And since I'm apparently a financial burden, I figured I should take that burden upon myself." The agent, bless his clueless heart, started spreading out the papers. Purchase agreement, title transfer documents, disclosure forms. And there it was, printed in official legal text, my name as the buyer. The purchase price, $3.7 million, right there in black and white. Those numbers became real in front of her eyes. This wasn't a joke, wasn't a misunderstanding. This was legal, binding, official reality. My mother-in-law sank back onto the couch, still staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. The lawyer began explaining the process, asking if there were any questions, going through the standard closing protocol. But I could see her mind was somewhere else entirely, trying to reconcile the daughter-in-law she dismissed as worthless with the woman who just bought her house outright. After the papers were signed and the agent and lawyer left, there was this heavy silence. My father-in-law excused himself, probably unable to handle the tension. My husband squeezed my hand and gave me a look that said, "You've got this," before also stepping away. That left me and her sitting across from each other in what was now technically my property. She finally spoke, and her voice was shaking with anger and humiliation. You went behind my back. You made me look like a complete fool in front of everyone. If you had this kind of money, why were you living off my son this entire time? The accusations came pouring out, all the defense mechanisms kicking in, trying to make me the villain in her story. I took a breath and responded calmly. मैं कभी आपके बेटा पे या आपके पैसों पे नहीं जी रही थी। आपने अज्यूम कर लिया क्योंकि आपको मेरी एक्चुअल स्टोरी जानने में इंटरेस्ट ही नहीं था। आपने डिसाइड कर लिया कि मैं क्या हूँ विदाउट एवर आस्किंग मी। I kept my voice steady, not aggressive, just firm and clear. वो संडे ब्रंच आपने मुझे फाइनेंशियल बर्डन कहा था इन फ्रंट ऑफ योर इंटायर सोशल सर्कल. You labeled me as someone who takes and never gives. You chose that label without knowing a single fact about my finances, my work, my contributions. I could feel emotion rising, but I pushed it down, stayed focused. What happened today wasn't revenge, it was reality catching up. I bought your house at full market rate. Your retirement is now secure. The property you love stays in the family. I didn't cheat you, didn't trick you, didn't do anything except show you the truth you refused to see. I leaned forward slightly, making sure she heard every word. But here's what changes from today. You will not insult me about finances ever again. You don't have to like me, you don't have to approve of me, that's completely fine. But you will not treat me like a parasite, a burden or a gold digger. वो narrative आज खत्म हो गया. My voice was steel wrapped in silk. If you ever want to treat me like actual family, with respect, with basic human decency, my door isn't closed. मैं bitter नहीं हूँ, but respect के बिना access भी नहीं मिलेगी. You can't have it both ways anymore. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, and prepared to leave. She sat there silent, probably for the first time in years, not having a quick comeback, not having some cutting remark ready. The power dynamic had shifted completely and irreversibly. I wasn't the one begging for acceptance anymore. I wasn't the one who needed to prove my worth. That chapter was over. So let me tell you what I learned from this whole situation and why I'm sharing this story with all of you. People who call you a financial burden, who dismiss your worth, who underestimate your capabilities, they're usually working from assumption, not information. They don't have your spreadsheets, they don't know your accounts, they don't see the full picture of your life. They just make judgments based on their own biases and limitations. And here's the thing about self-respect. Being kind doesn't mean you have to hide your worth when someone repeatedly tries to diminish you. It doesn't mean you stay silent while people publicly humiliate you. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't an argument or a confrontation. Sometimes it's simply letting your actions, your achievements, your undeniable reality speak for themselves.
There's this quote I love. Never let someone who has done nothing tell you how to do anything. My mother-in-law spent years telling me I brought nothing to the table, while sitting at a table I could have bought and sold multiple times over. The disconnect was stunning. So if you're in a situation where people underestimate you, where family or friends or anyone treats you like you're less than you are, remember this. You don't owe anyone your financial statements. You don't owe anyone proof of your worth. But you also don't have to accept their false narrative. Set your boundaries, protect your dignity, and when the time is right, let the truth reveal itself in ways they can't deny. My mother-in-law called me a financial burden at Sunday brunch, served with scrambled eggs and public humiliation. But when she saw that closing table, when she saw my name on those $3.7 million purchase documents, one thing became crystal clear. I wasn't her son's burden. I was her house's new owner. And that's not revenge, that's just reality finally getting a seat at the table. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life payback stories, and drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. Because sometimes the best comeback isn't what you say, it's what you do. And trust me, a signed deed speaks louder than any words ever could.